Hi, I'm Mike Lang, and I've been asked to be the host for the 2021 Summer PianoSpheres Jazz Concert Series. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce Roger Kellaway's concert. Roger is a dear friend of mine. We have collaborated on many projects over a 50-year period of knowing each other. He was Academy Award nominated for A Score to A Star Is Born by Barbra Streisand. He worked with Bobby Darin. He's worked with Sonny Rollins. He's been across the board one of the most contributive people in the arts, writing classical music, film soundtracks, and participating with some of the most historic jazz events ever. I know you're going to enjoy the concert. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I probably don't need this. I was researching this piece. This is a piece called Killer Joe that was written by the great tenor saxophonist Benny Golson. I actually did an album with Benny Golson about 15 years ago. And I have moments where I get very shy. So I never hung out with him, and I never asked him who Killer Joe was. I've always wanted to know. Anyway, this tune, believe it or not, was written in 1954. A long time ago. I was pretty young. 14, 15. So no jazz show would be complete without Ellington. So here's a piece of Ellington. This is called Cottontail. Thank you. That was nice. That's a good duo.
Yeah, it's fun.
I like that. Oh my God, we're having fun. Yeah, we only waited a year and a half to do. Okay, this is, we're going to do a couple of songs by Gershwin. First song is called Love Walked In, and the second song, which I will segue to, is called I Was Doing All Right. Now, I Was Doing All Right is a song that, to my knowledge, is not a well-known song of Gershwin's. I found it on a 1957 recording of Stan Getz with the Oscar Peterson Trio, which is one of my favorite CDs of all time. In fact, I have 4 copies of it because I don't want anyone to get corrupted. I've got backups. I got it. By the way, this is a getting to know you session, which is something all piano players know about. I played this piano upstairs where it is a teaching piano. I played it for an hour, but we're still getting to know each other. And before this hour is up, you're going to learn something. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to feature our bassist, John Clayton. This is a piece that I wrote in 1972, which was, of course, for those of you that know my history, I was in the middle of all of my cello quartet writing. I did get several reviews that thought my group was 4 cellos. And they also thought I was a cellist. But the truth of the matter was I had 2 stacks of music, and one stack said Sax Quartet, which was the quartet with Tom Scott, and the other said Cello Quartet. I just left the title. Seems to me somewhere in history there's a Bartok clarinet trio that's not 3 clarinets. I think it's clarinet, piano, violin. So, this is called California Rainy Day. I guess at the time we had one. John Clayton.
Nice.
So maybe we'll get some rain now. The next tune is a Thelonious Monk tune. It's called Straight No Chaser. However, this will not just be a blues. What I decided to do, first I took the tune and I inverted it. So those of you that know, so the inversion goes, so, and then I needed a bass line. So what I came up with is what's called a ground bass. And the ground bass is a concept compositionally that happened in the 17th century, early 18th century. Normally, in a composition, the ground bass would go throughout the entire piece. And however, that's not going to happen today. But you will hear it by itself, and then you'll hear it again with the guitar melody, and then you'll hear it again with the guitar melody and the piano inversion. So this is Straight No Chaser. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. I'm going to play a piece for you now that I don't generally play in clubs. It's not really a club kind of piece. The original title of the piece is called Arcades, and it comes from a concept which was going to be 3 pieces, but actually I only wrote 2. Arcades 1 was an in memoriam to Dr. Martin Luther King, which I wrote for tuba and piano, and that has been published. It's been played many times, but nobody's recorded it yet. And this is Arcades 2, and this is an in memoriam for Igor Stravinsky. The 3rd Arcades was going to be for Kennedy, but I never did get to it. So this piece uses quite a bit of minimalism in the beginning before you actually get to the theme, which is, there's a pulse involved, and the theme comes out in 3/4, and then there's an improvisation based on the theme, then you hear the theme again, and then you hear the minimalism. So it's like ABCBA is the form. welcoming back Bruce Forman and John Clayton. We're going to feature our guitarist, Bruce Forman. This is a tune that I wrote in 1970 that I wrote for my wife, Georgiana. This is called Georgiana Number 2. Actually, Georgiana Number 1 was recorded with the Baja Marimba Band. And there are many others beyond too, but Georgiana Number 2 has nicely survived for 56 years. This is Bruce Forman. Bruce Forman. We're about to close this concert, but we have a little surprise here for Jess Morton. The secret is out. It's your birthday.
I got a couple of years on you.
However, I'm not going to play Happy Birthday for you. But what I am going to do, in fact, I'll play it first and then I'll tell you. Don't do that. There you go. That is Happy Birthday in retrograde. Which means next year you'll be a year younger. So we're going to close the concert with this is an Ellington piece called Take the A Train, but it will not be done as an up-tempo, which is usually what happens with this tune. Unfortunately or fortunately, I happen to have a gig with Joe Newman, the great trumpet player, in New York. And he introduced me to A Train in the tempo we're going to play it in. And I remember Ted Dunbar was the guitar player on the gig, and we used to laugh a lot while we were playing A Train because the tempo was so much slower than we were used to playing it. It's like it takes a half hour to get through one chorus. So, anyway, this is it, A Train. Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Forman on guitar. John Clayton on bass. I'm Roger Kellaway. I'm very pleased to be here, and I would like to thank Heidi Lazeman, the Pasadena Conservatory of Music, which is where you are now, Cindy Lewis, Mr. Nick Gerpe, who teaches on this piano, and who was gracious enough to loan me this piano for today. The reason I picked this piano is it's a Yamaha C7, and that's the same piano I have at home, so I figured that the action would be pretty close to what mine is at home, and that's so. I'd like to thank the PianoSpheres crew, all this crew, Lewis. And of course, my dear friend Mike Lang will do an interview fairly quickly after this. Anyway, thanks for coming.
We're recording this right after the concert that went so well, and I thought I've talked to you just chronologically, and I'd read some of the other things that you put in print, and so it came to my knowledge that both your parents had some experience at the piano and in music, and I wondered if that was like the first connection you made was through your family or through friends or through how it all began.
Yeah. Actually, my dad could only play one piece, and it was the Bells of St. Mary. That's all he could do. Mom could play, the only standard that I can remember is If. Was that a Victor Moan tune, I think?
What was it called?
If.
Oh boy, I don't know.
Yeah, and so she had about four.
She had
standards.
4 tunes, so she had 3 up on him.
Yeah. Yeah, but the Bells of St. Mary is what got me lessons.
That was the one.
Because I copied him. And they said, you want to...
And did he have a certain approach, a certain style? It was,
No.
No, okay.
No,
Okay,
he had
well,
a style with a paintbrush. Yeah. No, he was a painting contractor. He hung wallpaper and painted houses, and he did that all his life. The interesting thing about that is many years, and I was a teenager, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with one of Dad's workers named Larry. Now, Larry had to be probably in his 70s at the time. I mean, well, I was a teenager. He looked very old to me. We did an interview, And every single question that he asked me, I had to answer in such a way where he got information about me. And I thought, I still remember this interview as being one of the best that I ever had. And I thought, wow, and you're on ladders every day with my dad? And Dad doesn't come home and talk about this.
No kidding.
So I never had a conversation with Dad about Larry. But I've always remembered sitting at the kitchen table and having this wonderful conversation. Amazing.
So, what was the piano like? I assume there was a piano at your family's house because they both played?
Oh, we had an old, it was an upright, I think originally in the basement, and then Dad built an addition onto the house, because actually his father built the house, and Dad could do all that, wiring, and he knew how to do that. So there were a couple of extra rooms in this in the addition, and that's where the upright piano went, and that's what I practiced on.
Yeah, I had a small piano too, as I recall, as a kid. Now, I know you played the bass early on, but which came first, the bass, the piano?
Well, the piano came first. When I went to audition in junior high school for the orchestra, there were 8 piano players. And I remember the director, Vinnie Morato, and Vinnie looked at me and he said, "How would you like to play one of those?" And he was pointing back to the bass player.
You're a bass player.
And I'll never forget him. Tenny Peck was his name. I said, sure, I'll go for it. Well, I could already read bass clef.
You had never played the bass at that point. This is what you're going to do, and get up for it.
So I picked up a bass, and I stood next to him. I could read bass clef, and I would look at the bass notes, and I would watch where Tenny put his hands. And that's how I learned to play the bass.
And how did
4 years later, I played 4th bass with the Massachusetts All-State Symphony.
Really? Wow. And how did you get an instrument? How did that come to be?
I
remember?
I think I paid $150 for a bass.
You still have a bass?
I don't. No, I sold it about 10 years ago. Chuck DeMonico worked on the bass for a while. I could never play it again. He changed the sound peg, and I was talking to John Clayton about this, and he put steel strings on the bass. I couldn't play they hurt.
Oh.
Even though, I was a gut guy. Not only was I a gut string guy, but the strings were so high that nobody sat in on my bass.
It's fascinating to me that you would have the flexibility to go to something so foreign. I remember in my life where somehow I was hooked up with a violin, and it was a very, very short relationship. I hated it, It just didn't translate. And then I read percussion was part of your life.
Yeah, I did. I went through a whole bunch of particularly snare drum exercises. Now, I could do all paradiddles and stuff like that. I almost became a percussionist, much to the chagrin of my mother, because my room was above the kitchen, and she used to get all the playing on the desk. That's why, to this day, if I drum my hands
that's
on
great
the table,
doing it. Yeah.
I can hear her say.
I learned actually quite
recently. She
recently.
wouldn't say it; she just look at me.
Sorry.
If I drum my fingers, just look. I'd get a look. She wouldn't say, "Please stop."
Wow. Yeah. And you did a lot of singing, choral singing?
I did 11 years of choral singing. First with 3 girls. We used to do quartet stuff. We used to do Bach. But that's where I learned to blend. Then I did New England Conservatory Chorus, where we did, the usual Beethoven's Ninth, Berlioz' Requiem.
That's huge.
But the pieces I remember are the Honegger Christmas Cantata. And this is with the Boston Symphony with Charles Munch. The Honegger Christmas Cantata and Stravinsky's
Symphony of Psalms?
Yes, Symphony
Really?
of Psalms. Yeah.
Well, that's just like...
That was the first time I saw a major seventh in the bass line.
That's interesting. Yeah, a moment.
It was...
So I'm imagining you in high school or junior high school, and you're doing the things that you talked about. Did you start playing in jazz ensembles?
Yeah, that's what happened. I played for years. I played bass. We had a little band called the Kingsmen, and I was the bass player.
And what kind of
And
material?
most of us are gone now, but the pianist, Freddie, was still in communication.
And they did what kind of material?
We used to play... Well, the cornetist in the band was Dick Sudhalter. And I don't know if you ever knew him. He became quite a well-known writer.
Uh-huh.
But Dick's father played in the original, I believe it was the original Dixieland band, played alto sax. So I kind of grew up with Dick and his father, and they had thousands of 78s in the basement. Really? And they were all Dixieland. So Dick Sudhalter was pushing me in the direction of Dixieland. And then there was another player named Dave Schreier, who was a tenor sax player, and he was a modern guy, and he was pushing me in that direction. So we played standards with our band, but there were other dances that I went to. We played out of books called combo orcs, which are like Van Alexander had one set. So you each have a combo orc, and you turn to whatever page it is, and you've got the piano part or the bass part, and and they're all arranged so you can play.
Is everything written out, but there are chord symbols as well, or?
I think their chord symbols were,
Maybe not.
They must have. Yeah.
But
I can't remember when I first, could read chord symbols.
But in playing in the band, was there looseness and a little bit of whatever would take place? It wasn't just reading exactly the combo work transcription?
Well, it was junior high school.
So
you remember that?
I don't know.
You tell me how that felt. I look back on it, and let's say that, I wouldn't like to repeat it. I wouldn't like to go back there.
Yeah.
Not even with actually, there's only a couple of us left in the original Kingsmen.
So from junior high school to high school and more jazz.
High school got more serious because the Newton High School in Massachusetts was the number 3 high school in the country, which meant that we had a full symphony orchestra.
Wow.
We had a marching band and a jazz band. And we had Don March was the conductor of the orchestra. And we had Henry Lasker teaching theory, but some of the stuff he was teaching was college level. For instance, for your senior graduation from Henry Lasker's class, you had to write a piece for orchestra.
That's amazing. That's
And then
fantastic.
we had Red Doran, and Red was from... I think Tommy Dorsey or Glenn Miller. I'm not sure. No, we had Dante Ippolito with the jazz band first. He was from Glenn Miller's band. Then we had Red Doran, who was from Tommy Dorsey's band. And I remember one day, Red Doran played the Bach Second Brandenburg, which is the one with F trumpet, twice. He played it twice. I was very impressed. Played twice through.
Wow.
That was,
yeah.
it was.
So were you playing still a lot of bass or some more piano by the time you were in high school, or?
I was playing some piano, but as far as gigging, it was all.
It was all bass.
It was all bass till I got to New York.
That's so interesting. So interesting. And then from there to the New England Conservatory, was that the next step? Or?
Yeah.
No.
It was, yeah.
Oh.
Well, then I played more piano there. But I was studying piano with a pianist named Roland Nadeau, and Jed Cook was the composition teacher, and Georges Malheur was the first bass with the Boston Symphony. I was studying with him. But I didn't get anywhere because I would practice on a 3/4 size bass, and when you study with George, you played the full size bass. And one of the things that I was trying to work on was intonation. And you know,
all the ratios are different, right? The spacing?
Yes.
All that? Yeah. Hey.
The spacing between B flat and C is much different on a big bass than on a 3/4. So I didn't learn anything from that.
You got up for it, kind of? Just learned the larger
I
bass?
used to play, and Joan would appreciate this. I still have the Nanny books. I remember the 3-octave scales.
Ooh.
And I remember Rustlin and Ludmilla Overture. And the bass had the same part that the violins had.
How do you remember that? It's just startling.
I guess because it was a frightening moment in my life, and I've never forgotten it.
It's great. All right, I'm going to jump around because I've got all this homework that I did because I have no brain. But the truth is, some of this stuff I don't know where it took place. So I'm now going to ask you about something that might be further in the future. But I started reading about you had psychic revelations where you had learned through, however you will explain this to us, that you had been doing science and music for more than 2,000 years in other lifetimes, I assume. Does that ring a bell?
Well, I've always, most of my life, I've known that this can't be it.
Right.
And when I look at how I play the piano, and how blessed I am with the technique that I have, and how little I practice.
That sounds familiar. Sorry.
So I'm so grateful, and I know it has to come from more than one lifetime.
Yeah.
It's got to have been. Because, you know, people say, "Oh, I'd love to play like you," and I usually say, "Well, but." Are you playing at all? Oh, no, because I can't play like you. Oh, well, then you're missing out on something that you'd be enjoying. You tell me you'd like to play. So, but anyway, I've always thought it had something to do with more lifetimes.
So you knew this from an internal place more than reading about stuff and saying, well, you must have had some external way to know that was something to think about, or not?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
From reading. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I resonate with that. So when I read that, I thought, this is interesting. But I haven't backed it up with any kind of study. It's just I sit down and feel certain things, but it is that kind of stuff. You know, it's interesting. So when you were done with the New England Conservatory, did you move directly after that to New York, or did you stay there for a while?
What happened was I was there for 2 years, and then I left the conservatory to go play bass with Jimmy McPartland.
With who?
Jimmy McPartland.
Uh-huh. Oh, Jimmy McPartland, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a real
And
band.
that was for 6 months. And then Ralph Marturi's big band for 6 months.
Wow, that's just...
And then I went to New York. I still had the bass.
So were you thinking at that time that's what you would continue to do, or did you have any sense of other things?
One of the things that was really interesting in New York is in the first few days I was there, I sat in, maybe the first night, I sat in with Jimmy Giuffre. And Jimmy Giuffre liked the way I played and said, you know, I've been interested in having a composer be on, you know, he was working with the trio, which would end up being a clarinet or sax, and Jim Hall was the guitarist, and Ralph Pena ultimately was the bass player.
Sure.
He was interested in composers. And so I had an opportunity, but I didn't take it. For one reason or another. It's,
you just said no.
I didn't do it. I came across the same kind of thing again with Maynard Ferguson. I actually auditioned for him, and he said, well, what do you want? You want bass or piano? And I didn't do that either. But getting back to Giuffre, the next thing that Giuffre did was Paul Bley and Steve Swallow.
Yeah.
Oh my
I have all those records. They were real landmarks for me. Paul Bley was a landmark for a long time. It was just like where'd that come from? What's all that about?
Yeah.
And I remember there's a recording with him and Bill Evans together, something George Russell did, I think, where they played together. And,
with Paul Bley and...
Paul Bley and Bill Evans. There were two pianos, kind of dueling, you know. And it was during that period when Bill was pretty edgy, kind of, with some of the things that he was involved with.
Oh, yeah. Great time.
Yeah.
I love the, was it Billy the Kid or something? Or maybe it's a George Russell piece. But
Yeah, Concerto for Billy the Kid, is that what you said? These microphones are so reverberant. It's like I'm trying to understand what we're talking about. So you woke up one day and decided to go to New York, or how did that happen?
I was headed towards the studios, and which meant you had to either be in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago.
You wanted to be involved in recording and writing and playing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of studio work and...
Now I have Lena Horne. Was that recording stuff or other stuff?
I never recorded with Lena. I did a tour with her, and I was part of Chico Hamilton's band.
Really? Oh, wow.
With Gabor Szabo.
Okay.
And I think Albert Stinson was on bass.
Oh, God, he was
Chico
great.
on drums. The thing that I remember most about that, other than Lena, when she was singing, got into a trance. When you looked at her, she was almost not there. She got so deep into it. We were doing theater in the round. We did a theater in the round in Burlingame, near San Francisco, and we had an orchestra. And Ray Ellis was the conductor of the orchestra.
Ray Ellis?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
But the stage revolved.
Oh, my God.
And we're on the stage. So you know what happens. Every minute inch that you move, your whole relationship time-wise or rhythm-wise to the orchestra changes. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can relate to that, but that's amazing. So many things that you mentioned that I have relationships with some of these people, and Albert Stinson said he was a genius who had such a short life.
I loved it. It was a great time. And then after the gig, I would drive immediately to Sausalito to hear Denny Zeitlin.
To hear who?
Denny Zeitlin.
Denny Zeitlin.
Yeah.
We ended up working together on one of his movies that you could
Yeah,
remember that. And
we did. In Body Snatchers.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers,
Yeah.
right. And I remember the piano parts were grueling because Denny Zeilen has huge hands, and some of us don't. You know? So you made some of the best records ever made. You got to record with Sonny Rollins on Alfie, I think it was, right?
Yeah, it's the only time I recorded with Sonny. I love that album.
Me too.
There are 3 albums that all come to mind. Alfie is one, More Blues Than the Abstract Truth with Oliver Nelson,
Yeah.
and Bumpin' with Wes Montgomery. And they were all done in Rudy Van Gelder's studio, which I absolutely adored. It was designed by a disciple of Frank Lloyd Wright, and I just, I loved it being there.
What was the piano there?
He had 2 Steinways.
So it's
No,
possible for you to love a Steinway.
Well, it is, if it's made in Germany.
Okay. That's a private joke, I'm sorry.
I was doing an album with Gene Bertoncini and Michael Moore, and I walk into the studio, and Rudy Van Gelder points me to the piano that he wants me to do all the rehearsals on.
I heard a story like that once, yeah.
And then, after I finish all that, he points to this other piano, and now he wants to make the recordings.
And you didn't get to
And I
make
said,
friends?
you want me to rehearse over here, and you want me to play that one on the... No, I'm not doing that.
Good for you.
I'm not.
Yeah,
It was the stupidest request I'd ever heard in my life. Well, this is a real piano player's story. I mean, imagine if you sit for hours rehearsing on one instrument and you get to have some relationship, and then somebody says, no, you can't do that. I want you to record over here, and you got to start all over again.
Yeah, he was known for this. He was very, I guess, what's the word? I can't think of it right now, but he cared about stuff like that. So I remember, I think it must maybe a little bit later, Bob James told me about a story. He was there, and that time they had a piano, and they had a Rhodes that you would rehearse on.
Oh, no.
That's even worse, you know.
I remember going, I lived in the same building that Tony Studd lived in, bass trombone player. And we're walking in to do, I think, More Blues Than the Abstract Truth. And Tony looks at me and he says, watch this. And he goes over to the piano and he lifts up the follow board and starts playing all this stuff. And Rudy comes screaming out of the control booth. And what he'd done is he locked the piano. But when you lock the piano, I guess, it doesn't lock the black keys. Oh. So Tony just lifted up the follow board and started playing all this stuff on the black keys, and Rudy went nuts. It was a beautiful moment.
That's hysterical. Okay, let's see. So, and I also know you recorded with Ben Webster. What did you do with Ben Webster? Because I love Ben Webster.
Well, I did several albums with Ben Webster. The first one was called More, M-O-R-E, with Clark Terry. Mm. And I did all the charts on that. And that was basically with Bill Crow and Dave Bailey and Gene Bertoncini and Clark Terry and Ben. Then,
was that one of your first times with Clark Terry? Because you ended up working with Clark's band with two horns.
Yeah, with Brookmeyer.
Brookmeyer,
yeah,
right. Yeah.
2.5 years I spent working with them. I made 2 CDs with them, or 2 LPs. Mm. I made 3. There's one called, I think, Meet Me at the Fair.
That sounds familiar.
With
I remember that.
Ben
I remember
Webster.
the cover. It was on Impulse, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think I had to play it's some sort of electric something or other on a couple of tunes. That's it. I don't remember because I do my best to forget those moments.
I understand. It's important that we can forget things every once in a while. Like, that's why I have these notes. There's enough notes for a 7-hour interview, so you got to let me know when we're done. So, when did you start getting interested in contemporary classical music and experimental music, electronic music, music concrete?
All of that happened in my teenage years.
Oh, back there. Okay.
Because as I was growing up, I had a Victrola, right? And the Victrola was set on a timer for wake up.
Oh, okay.
So it would wake up and an LP would play. But it could be Bach, and then eventually, as I got a little bit older, I got more into jazz. That was after age 12. And I started getting into contemporary music, probably Stravinsky around, Stravinsky, Prokofiev, Russian composers for sure, and around that time. And then I also had a guy named, his name was Jeff Adderton, and he worked at the Colony record store in New York.
Okay.
And I would go in, and I'd have some change, and he'd say, "That bin down there is where you're going. That's what you want." And that's where I found Messiaen and Earl Brown, John Cage, and you know, a lot of those people. And I started. I was just interested in it. You know, I thought about this for years and years. It's about sound. I'm interested in all different kinds of sound.
Different timbres and colors.
One of those, of course, yeah.
So that got your attention a lot. Now, it just occurred to me, you were in New York when a lot of these people were there. Did you get to meet or interact with any of the New York composers?
I met Cage, but I didn't. We didn't really do anything. I went to a Merce Cunningham concert, and Cage was backstage, and I got to go backstage, and I met him. But I never really got to hang with him or talk about anything. I mean, I was not only interested in what he was doing, but philosophically what he was doing.
Did you ever come into contact with Varese? You're smiling.
Varese stepped on my foot once.
The left or right? Sorry, I had to do that.
That was good. I set that up beautifully. And we were going into a John Cage concert, and I was in line. He stepped on my foot. I called him. Varese, because I knew he was either studying with, so Charlie Parker was going to study with him.
That was the connection there.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Varese waited until he was 64 years old before there were instruments being made that made the sounds that, you know, he built his own stuff. He had a thing with a piece of rope that came out of a floor tom that he used to pull just to make sounds. So I called him, and I wanted to study with him, and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm too busy. Call me in the fall."
Call in the fall. Okay.
So I did. I called it's a sad story because he died 4 days later. He died 4 days later.
Okay.
So I never got to the village to, get to his place or to discuss anything.
Yeah.
Closest I came to Varese is Beatrice Wood, whom I met in Ojai. And I think she was 102 at the time. But man, she knew Varese, she knew all those composers of of that time, like the 20s and 30s. She knew all of them.
That's right, yeah, the history, the link, yeah, connection.
Amazing, yeah.
Did you meet, I'll just throw some names, Morton Feldman, David Tudor, none of that, Lamont Young? No.
Love Morton Feldman. I mean, I'm really a big fan of his music, and I would love to have.
I like the early shorter pieces, as opposed to the 4.5-hour string quartets.
I know. I'm sitting with Jean Renaud, who played cello with the Kronos string quartet, and they're doing Morton Feldman's second string quartet, which is 6 hours long. Now, they're doing it in Canada, and the show is only 5 hours long.
There you
So
go.
they had to cut something. I don't know, there's something really hilarious about this. You know, and kind of absurd, because Morton Feldman had said at one point, you know, something happens when a piece goes on for more than an hour. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know, I could make several comments about that. But I'm agreeing with you. I like the shorter pieces. There's a piece for piano and string quartet that's really beautiful.
I think I remember that one. Well, I remember, I think the first recording that I knew of his music was on Columbia when they were doing 20th century music, and David Tudor did, an album of the solo piano music, and they were all relatively short and very incisive and nice. Yeah, they were great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. We got through one page of 20. So at some point you decided to go to LA from New York. You want to talk about how that transition took place, or did you wake up one day and bam? Or?
No, no, not really. In 1965, I met Georgiana, and she was interested in having me meet her family, and they lived in California. She's a California girl, and somehow that got all hooked up with the fact that I spent a year with Jackie Leonard.
So were you traveling, doing tours with him? Conducting, music director
And
kind
after,
of thing?
after Jackie, I was with Bobby Darin for almost 3 years. But somehow, you know, in that time, we moved to California.
So you came to LA, what year would it have been?
I think it was 65.
65?
Yeah.
Well, I know you did this, one of my favorite albums, which was one of my early introductions to you, was the record called Stride, which Roger did, and showing his love and his relationship to stride piano playing, but in a really, I thought, wonderful context with having strings. I can't remember the orchestration, but you had orchestra on some of it, I guess.
It wasn't big. I think I was already enamored with cello. I think I had 2 trombones and 2 cellos.
Is that what it was? Wow.
Yeah.
I just remember it was just so personal. That's what I liked about it so much. It was what you felt about that music. You weren't trying to historically place yourself in it. It's like you owned the music on its own terms with you, if that makes any sense.
Well, I can play at stride. I don't consider myself a stride piano player. I don't.
I can understand you saying it that way.
I know the concept of it, and I can play at it, and it's fun to do that. But
well, to me, and I think you said it. I won't be able to repeat your words, but it's kind of like it gave you a way to treat the piano more fully and more orchestrally, because the left hand would be involved in a different kind of way.
Yeah, so, that's wonderful. Yeah.
And it was always the lyric part of it that I was always struck by, with the way it entered your vocabulary, so to speak. It's like to hear you take a song and rethink it on those terms from that place. It was a very pure place for you to be, a very honest place for you to be, and a very communicative, identifiable, and enjoyable thing to hear.
Well, I'm so glad. Thank you. Playing stride or doing something with your left hand is playing the piano. And there's nothing like playing the piano solo. And you've got an entire universe there. You've got 88 keys.
Yeah.
I mean, there are pianos that are, it's interesting, like Fazioli, that they're making the pianos longer, but they're not putting any more, yes, the Bösendorfer, the Imperial Bösendorfer has 9 extra keys on the bottom. Nobody plays them. I do. That's the first thing I play whenever I have a piano like that.
So I don't know the chronology completely, but was it pretty soon after you moved to Los Angeles that you did the Dr. Dolittle album with Bobby Darin?
Dolittle, you and I met, that's 67.
67, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's where we met on the session, I guess. And Roger had taken the score to Dr. Dolittle and done this wonderful orchestral treatment for Bobby Darin. And he was conducting, and I was in the orchestra, and that's how we met. And it's a very special album. And I did read that you said that it remains a very special album in your musical life.
I love that album. Yeah. No, I'm very proud of the charts, and wow.
Was it Johnny Guerin? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
John and Chuck.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did Talk to the Animals, and Bobby wouldn't let us do any overtime. And we did 12 charts in 6 hours.
That's amazing.
And Talk to the Animals was one take, and that was the single.
Nice. Nice. And then was the Cello Quartet maybe the next thing that happened chronologically?
Cello Quartet, I started writing music for Edgar Lustgarten. I was interested in cello and piano music, but
I had read that you had invited him over, and you guys would go through your pieces for cello and piano.
Yes.
And that was sort of like the birth of the.
It is the birth of the Cello Quartet.
Yeah.
I was going to A&M Records, and I had a meeting with Herb Alpert, and I had about 5 projects that I wanted to talk about, and he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do the Cello Quartet." He said, "Fine." And I
Thank God.
well, I didn't ask him to produce it. I told him I wanted Steve Goldman to produce it, who was here
And he's here today, Stephen
No, he left a little while ago, but so that was it. I mean, Herb supported all that, and you take the it's called the Cello Quartet, but the first piece on the album is a little chamber piece that I wrote. I mean, we had a 38-piece orchestra, and they went for that. And we put the A&M Symphony Orchestra on the back as a credit. And they even went for that, but they didn't ever go for it. They never went. I was working on having A&M be a company that really supported orchestral stuff
Well, I think it was one of the most important things you've done. And people are known for various things, but nobody else, it's a different sound, it's a different language. It's not just like, okay, it's the Roger Kellaway Jazz Quintet, or, it really has his sound, his character, and it's who he is to me. Very much one of the things that really identifies you in the best way.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And we actually played one tune from that album today when we played Georgiana number 2. How
many, you did maybe 3 albums with the Cello Quartet, something like that?
We did two for A&M, and then we added Joe Porcaro on drums, and we did a direct-to-disc album. And then we did Just in Time with the Singers Unlimited.
Wow, I'd forgotten that one. Yeah.
And that was all about odd times.
That's great. So when did, let's see, so that takes us into the late 70s, I guess. And was All in the Family maybe the next kind of really remarkable thing?
Well, that comes along in 1970. In 1970, All in the Family happened.
Oh, it started that far back.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
that far back, and that's also...
Oh, you know what? I see what it is. Yeah, 1971 to 79.
Yeah.
I was jumping up to this other thing, which was
And the ballet that I wrote for George Balanchine is also in that time. And I got to conduct the New York City Ballet.
And is that the piece that Ralph Gershon and I did a demo for you? Yes, we did a two-piano version of it. Yeah. It's a gorgeous piece.
And Balanchine was with me, and we were at A&M Studios, and I had one bit in the third movement for percussion, so Emil was there. But I set that all up to show Balanchine that I could conduct the piece. I just had.
Have you digitized that? Do you still have the demo? Well,
You don't?
I probably have it on a cassette if I have it at all.
Oh, no, I have it on CD.
We have to
I'll
talk.
send you a copy.
So that, and then now here, I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, but I saw that you had done a lot of writing for various orchestras, but I don't have any details. So if there's any highlights, New York Philharmonic, LA Phil, National Symphony, New American Orchestra, any particular highlights there?
When I got back, I went to Israel in '85. When I got back from Israel, I wrote a piece called, well, I wrote a piano trio, but one of the movements was called the David Street Blues. I rearranged the David Street Blues for a symphony orchestra and a quintet featuring Paquito de Rivera.
Oh.
And we did that piece at the National Symphony on the 40th anniversary of Israel,
Well, that's fantastic.
with David Amram conducting. And the other piece that was that night was done by John Barry. So the joke of the evening was, Kellaway and Barry play Israel. Yeah, I mean, it didn't... Anyway, it worked out.
Yeah.
So that was a big highlight for me. The ballet in New York was a big highlight for me. I mean, it was. There's some nice things about orchestra, you know. I remember we did All in the Family. We had a TV special, and Norman Lear had to hire the LA Phil because of the contract, and he had to hire him for 7 hours.
Oh my God.
And I remember going to the studio, was at RCA, and I opened the door, and along the wall were 10 bass cases. And I said, There is a God. Come home.
I'm in Mecca.
If you got 10 basses, you got to have 66 strings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, that was fun, and that was with John. And in fact, you're on that. I'm sure you are. It's you and because I was only conducting. It's you, Chuck, and John.
Oh, fantastic!
Plus
I don't remember that one.
The orchestra. Well,
Yeah.
it's. I was having a conversation with Norman Lear, and I said, you got to have these people there for 7 hours, and you're talking about celebrating a show that basically doesn't have any music. What do you want me to do? He said, write. So I did. I wrote a whole bunch of cues, and...
So when did, let's see, well, let's talk about Barbra Streisand. When did that happen?
Streisand is Star is Born.
I'm looking here. I know I made a note of it, but now I'm, of course, not being able to see it. That's crazy. You received an Oscar nomination for the Best Adaptation Score in 1976.
Yeah.
So prior to that or during that year, maybe.
Prior to that, you know, I can just remember the experience of working with her.
I remember we were at Evergreen together, I think, doing some recording. I worked with you on the score, and I worked with Ian Fairbairn-Smith on some other material. The one thing I remember is, and I don't know if it was on your date or his, but there were 3 keyboard players, and they were all named Mike. It was myself and Mike Melvoin and Michael Boddicker, and Jules Chaikin was the contractor for all of it. And all I remember was there was a moment when Jules said, Mike, 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 shut up, shut up, shut up. We were having way too much fun.
That's a cute story.
But I do remember talking that she called you many years later because she was writing a book, and she asked you some questions about, I guess, some conversations you had when we were deciding what to write or what not to write, or I don't know if that rings any bells.
There was an award given out for the score, and she thought that it was wrongly given out because the score in that case really meant the songs and not the score. And as far as I know, her claim is she's going to put it right in her book, because the award should have gone to me for the score. But nevertheless, it was. There were many things about it that were really very exciting. We had a 60-piece orchestra. We had no budget because it was Streisand, which meant she of course would change her mind anytime she felt like it, but it meant I could change my mind. And if I change my mind, that ups the player's 50% more salary if I change an instrument. So I think the picture was very successful, and I think many of the times that I've been in the studio with bigger orchestras, it's been more of a fun musical experience than doing, say, just symphonic pieces or something like that. I don't think that's very much of a forte for me. I like smaller things.
I thought I'd jump. Just jump to today, and what I'd like to say about the group that you had today, and my sense of it is that Roger, when he has talked about people who have influenced him a lot, a name that comes up all the time is Oscar Peterson, and as he puts it, the will to swing, which I feel Roger owns that as an inheritance. You know, it's a real honest thing. And I can say as a musician who went through a period where it was always Oscar Peterson and nobody else, I can really respond to that and relate to it. And he talks about the fact that early on, Oscar's trio was guitar and bass. Later it became bass and drums. And there was a real lineage from Nat Cole's trio before he became a big star as a vocalist. And he had a trio with guitar and bass. And it's a sound that is so much different than the piano, bass, drums thing. And I think in a way it's a bigger challenge to figure out what to do with it. And the things I was really knocked out by in this concert is the way that Roger, he's not just a jazz piano player, not that that wouldn't be enough, but he brings his arranging and compositional skills to it. And so he has really, in the context of having a band that can be loose and improvise, contributed arranging and almost compositional moments in your, interpretation of the material that is significant and unique and very effective. So maybe you'd like to talk about some of that.
Wow, thank you.
I didn't even write all that down. I just said it.
One of the early interesting things about Oscar that I read was that he was breathing along with his phrasing.
Vocal.
So that and I think he was singing too. Yeah, in order to arrive at the same conclusion that maybe a woodwind player would arrive at, instead of a piano line, which, essentially could go on for days. It didn't have to breathe at all. So I found that pretty interesting, and that's when I started to really to sing along with my own playing. But the will to swing, I was in Milan with Gene Lees, and it was the Oscar Peterson trio, and Gene turned to me and he said, "How do you feel about Oscar?" I said, "The will to swing." He said, "That's it. That's the title of my book."
Yeah.
And
the groove is just so four to the floor. That's what I think about.
But the group that I always loved was Ray Brown and Herb Ellis. That was the group for me. I know Barney Kessel was there before and did a wonderful job, and that was a great trio too.
It's so interesting that you say that, because probably amongst the first 5 jazz records that I ever heard was Oscar Peterson live at the Stratford Shakespearean Festival.
That's the one.
It's a mono record, How High the Moon, and they were just like 800% on fire. That's all. And I used to play to that record, listening to that record, because it was a real peak moment for that trio, I think.
It was Herbie's favorite album, Herb Ellis's. So he told me.
Yeah. Let's see where we would go with that. I don't know. I think we've covered it. We've had a good interview.
We covered a lot of ground.
Do you have any additional comments or things you want to talk about?
I love talking.
You what?
I love talking.
You love talking?
I do.
Well, we love listening. I have to say, I am amazed. I can't remember yesterday, and this guy, it's all there. His whole life is so articulate and so vibrant, and you can feel how much he enjoys what he does and how much it means to him. And I think that's a really good place to close on. You've been wonderful today. The concert was fantastic.
Thank you,
and
Mike.
This has been a pleasure to share our shared experiences and your life. And
thank you so much. Thanks to Heidi. Thanks to PianoSpheres, and thanks to the memory of Leonard Stein, whom I did study with him for a year.
I studied with him too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Somewhere in my collection, I've got a Stockhausen score that I never gave back to him. I don't know why.
Check your answering service. The other teacher that we share, I don't know if we've talked about it much, George Tremblay.
Yeah.
I studied with him as a teenager. It was a whole different part of his life. And I know you studied with him when you came out to LA and so forth. Do you want to talk about that at all? I don't know, we out of time? Are we in the overtime yet? Nobody's bugging us. Okay.
Well, the thing about Tremblay was that he could improvise at the piano, which was interesting. And his system, which he had spent his entire life figuring out, the permutations of 12 notes into 3,456 notes, I think it is, 24 sets of 6 12-tone rows. He spent his whole life doing that. and then how that went together. You know, like if you're going da 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 da, you've got 4 different parts. So you start with note 1, and then it's it is a note. I think it's note 4. Is it?
I don't remember. I know the concept, but not the detail.
There's a sequence of putting the notes together, where as you progress through whatever piece you're writing, you will never have an octave.
I do remember this. I do remember this. This is like a 2-second primer in Schoenberg's music. He just developed this way of controlling chromatic music without tonality by having the 12 notes organized. And then he would do a retrograde of that, and an inversion of that, and an inverted retrograde to have more variation capability. And what Tremblay did was he found a way to expand mathematically the possibilities by starting on different notes and other things that I can't remember, but he wrote a book about it, and it became his life passion to have that be part of his language, that he had figured a way, because his writing embraced all of that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah. Anyway, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks so much for joining us on Roger's Concert. As you may know, PianoSpheres is making these broadcasts free of charge to the audience. And if you feel so inclined, we would really appreciate your financial support. Jump on the website, pianospheres.org, and see what you can do for us. And thank you so much.